Well, hello, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of Legacy Farm, the podcast. I'm your host, Jace Young, and today's topic of discussion is this: what happens when a family farm goes under? So, guys, pretty powerful and direct conversation today. I want to kind of let you into the back end of what I witnessed our family operation go through. More specifically, watched my parents go through when our operation went under. And this is it's just crazy to think about. It's almost 20 years ago, back in 2005, when the financial destruction struck a $10 million plus operation that my granddad had built since the 50s. And, as we're going through this, when a family farm goes under, and unfortunately, we continue to see it happen more and more every single year, hundreds of family farms go out of business every single year. But when a family farm goes under, the stages that somebody goes through emotionally is very similar to like the stages of grief. And what I mean by that is the first stage that somebody experiences when you finally get that cutoff point is they go through the stage of denial, right? They don't want to believe that they're actually going to lose everything. They don't want to face the truth. They want to continue to create this story in their head and live in fantasy land and try to pretend that everything is going to be okay and things are just going to eventually, solve themselves and everything's going to go back to normal. And I can just tell you that obviously doesn't happen. And the thing is, like, my granddad did this for a long time. He lived in denial, even when the operation was still running, but he lived in denial about where it was heading, right? And so before our operation actually officially went under, and I'm talking to the date that the bank actually cut them off and cut us off there was a 6-month runway there where the writing was on the wall, essentially. And my granddad knew essentially that, hey, we are going to go under. It's just a matter of time. But though, he's trying to protect himself and protect really his ego and his pride that he had in building this operation. And it's easier for us to tell ourselves story there versus facing the hard truth. So we enter this stage of denial until that final cutoff date comes, where I've told this in other podcasts, where my granddad went to my dad. My dad was running the feed yard and running the day-to-day operations there. It was just another normal day. And my granddad comes up to him and drops the bomb and says, hey, I just want to let you know that things have gotten too bad and the bank has cut us off officially today and we have to shut everything down. I remember that day. I remember walking into the kitchen. I remember seeing my dad sitting at the table, and out the back window of our kitchen you could see the feed yard a half mile away. And so essentially, it's my dad's life's work just a half mile away there. You start to see my dad enter these stages of denial as well, as the truth is just dropped on him that day. And that was a several-week process there where he went through that and really thinking through all the things that could have happened that led up to this final point here, where we finally hit this day of like, well, yeah, we're legit shutting down a 50-year operation that my dad has sacrificed his entire life to build. And there's just a lot of emotions. There's a lot of stories. There's a lot of blame and victimization and stuff like that people have to work through. And that kind of leads us into the next phase, or the next stage of grief, which is anger, right? So you go from denial, and now you're going to reach the stage of anger, where it's so easy to start getting pissed off at people around you. And this is what happened in our family. Everybody turned on each other, right? My parents turned to my grandparents. All the siblings turned against each other, because it wasn't just my parents that were impacted. My dad had 4 other siblings that were involved inside the operation as well. So everybody was angry and pissed off at each other and looking for somebody to blame, looking for somebody to pin all this on so that they didn't have to turn and look in the mirror at themselves and what they did to contribute to this, or what they could have done to prevent this as well. So we have denial, and then we should run straight into anger. And now we start moving into bargaining stage, right? And which is the third stage of grief here. And this is where you start to struggle to find meaning in what you're going to do now going forward, right? You're trying to find meaning in why this happened. You're trying to find meaning in your life and what you're going to do going forward. You're just at this major question mark, or this major crossroads in your life. And when my dad experienced this was his tough realization after he got through anger, that, hey, I still have to support my family. I have to swallow my ego and my pride and really start to change my identity and do what I need to do in order to provide for my family. So my dad goes from running a feed yard, 14,000 head feed yard with a team of 15 people daily basis, to running the county trash truck. I'll never forget it. But the thing is, though, is I'll always look up to my dad for that, and always have a tremendous amount of respect for him, because as a man, it's his responsibility to protect and provide for his family, just like it is for my family as well. When push comes to shove, we have to do whatever needs to be done in order to put food on the table and make sure we're still providing for our family. And we have to swallow our ego, swallow our pride. I don't care if you're the CEO of a company or you have to go be a janitor or something like that. It does not matter. We have to do what is required. And I will always respect my dad for how he handled that situation, and my mom as well. They both contributed. They both did whatever needed to be done in order to provide for our family. Fortunately, I was the only kid left in the house at that time. I was still in high school. My brother and my sister were out of the house at that time. I wasn't as much of a financial burden as it could have been, but still, it came with its challenges and stuff like that. Now, after the bargaining stage, though, right, and we go through this major crossroads around what are we going to do with our life? What's my purpose going to be? What am I going to do? Then we start to enter that stage of depression, right? And this is where things get really, really difficult for people, because everything you worked for, right? Everything you wanted, everything that you just held dear to your heart, that you've built over your life, you just come to the realization that, hey, it's gone and it's not coming back, right? Tough situation to be in, tough situation for me to watch my parents go through, because the most difficult part about this is I watched my dad struggle with his identity, right? And who am I going to be now, and what am I going to become? And you know, I worked hard for 40 years of my life and I have nothing to show for it. You know, that's what sucks about the entire situation, and that's what's tough. And so, you know, if you have ever met somebody that's went through a farm bankruptcy or just losing the business or anything like that, there's this stage that they go through, and they look back at the years of work and sacrifice and sweat and tears and just all the challenges that they went through, sitting here wondering, like, what the hell was it all for? Like, why did I do all this? Going through that, it actually provides some pretty good, you know, perspective, especially for me. It made me think differently as I got older around how I'm spending my time and what I really need to focus on and what truly matters. Because if you're raised on a family farm operation, you're conditioned to think and believe that the only thing that really matters and the thing that comes first is the family farm operation. That's just not the case, right? I have a different perspective now after building my own business and raising a family and having to do these things. Just thinking back to what my parents went through, like I just have a different perspective now, right? There's different things that matter more to me. And at the end of the day, this business and my job, and even me speaking on this podcast right now, is not all that I am, right? It does not define me. There's so much more to my life and to who I am as a person and as a father and as a husband, that I can't let this business define me. But again, though, it depends on how you're raised. If you were taught and trained and conditioned to think that you owe your life to the family legacy, and the family legacy is all that matters, and the family farm is all that matters, then yeah, I can see why my dad struggled with that so much. So we've talked about denial, we've talked about anger, we've talked about bargaining, we've talked about depression. Then we finally get to the stage of acceptance. And I feel like this stage did not truly happen for my parents until probably 5 years after the family farm operation went under. Because in the beginning, guys, like these wounds are deep. When it happens, holy crap, it is so deep. And there's some people in my family too that have not really escaped it. They're still struggling with it to this day. Almost 20 years later, they're still struggling with it. I'm not even joking with you there either. They haven't reached that acceptance stage, and really not just acceptance, but forgiveness as well. There was a lot of things that came out of the closet, essentially skeletons hidden in the closet about my granddad, going, you know, things that happened back in the day with farm operation that ultimately led up to the bankruptcy that my dad found out about over, you know, that 1 to 5 year period after the farm operation went under. And my dad, again, held a lot of anger and resentment there for a long time, and rightfully so. I would too, right? And I think my anger and resentment lasted longer than my dad's against my granddad and everything. But the thing is, I'll always, again, respect my parents for who they are as people, because you could truly see the time when they finally had reached acceptance, but ultimately forgiveness as well, right? And that's, again, just something I'll always respect about him, because a lot of people in this day and age, they want to hold grudges, right? They want to constantly blame other people and be victims in their life and blame other people for their circumstances and stuff like that, versus just getting to the stage in life where you're mature enough and you are emotionally aware enough to where you're like, hey, me thinking about this, me blaming people, me being a victim inside my own life isn't going to serve me. It's not going to serve my family. It's not going to serve what we want for our future. I got to get to this point where I just accept, hey, it is what it is, and it happened for a reason. And obviously it did happen for a reason, or it wouldn't have happened at all, right? God put us through this for a reason. And ultimately I have to learn to forgive and move on with my life. Otherwise, that entire thing, I've seen this time and time again as well, talking with families over the years, losing a family operation, it becomes an anchor to any type of growth or just moving forward in life. It becomes a massive anchor for some people. Now, again, I'll always respect my parents, because I figured I could visually see in them when they reached that acceptance and forgiveness level, not just in how they treated me, but also in how they treated my grandparents. And again, they just set the bar high there on what needed to happen. So my friends, that is kind of the stages that people go through. Now, the thing is though, too, is let's talk about the rest of the family there as well. There were some people in the family that I grew up with that I did not see for 10 years after the feed yard closed down. And when I talk about deep wounds, I'm talking about they run really deep there. And so even going through this, everybody went through this in their own path, right? And in their own time frame. But ultimately, ultimately, at the end of the day, there was a lot of our family that reached that acceptance and that forgiveness stage, and just, again, that trusting in God stage, essentially, that, hey, this all happened for a reason. There's no reason for us to hold grudges. It is what it is. And, we need to move on with life and accept each other and try to have some sort of a relationship going forward. Otherwise, like, what's it all about, right? What's the purpose of doing this and being here and stuff like that? So, my friends, anyways, a little bit of a deeper conversation today. Hopefully it made you think a little bit differently here. But if you know somebody that's been through a bankruptcy, or maybe you've been through a bankruptcy yourself, or witnessed your family go through one like I did, it was really important for me to understand these stages of grief and really relate them to what I watched people go through, right? And understanding what phases people are in. Again, because if you do know somebody that's going through this process currently, it's really important for you to know what stage they're in, because it's going to change how you talk to them. It's going to change how the conversation goes, because everybody has to go through this. When you lose something so dear to you, whether it's a business, a family member, or whatever it is, you have to go through this, and there's going to be a process. And for some people, it happens pretty quick. For other people, it takes years, and that's totally okay. But it's up to us to make sure that we are aware of what stages they're in, so we can try to help that individual through that process. So, my friends, anyways, that concludes today's episode. I hope you found it valuable, and we will catch you on the next one.